Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of ManOn2nd. My name is Eric Wiedeke. As always, I'm joined by Joe Forsaro. And I got to say, Joe, I wish it could be on better terms today.
Yeah. This is disappointment, frustration, anger, all that stuff. We could talk about as we dig into what has happened. And before we get going into talking about the lockout, and then we'll talk about the Marlins. Pretty basic today. Let me just do a quick shout out to Dugout Mugs. As you see here, I got my Marlins aluminum bat dugout mugs. They obviously come in wooden bats and such. I'm building a bright, nice little collection. Got my raised ones downstairs, and dugout mugs is a great product. Really creative. A lot of baseball fans really love it. You see it everywhere. And Eric put it at the bottom of the screen there. You see dugoutmugs.com/ManOn2nd and order your dugout mug today. And we could probably do some heavy drinking with our dugout mugs because Eric, it's not been a fun time and a fun 24 hours, and who knows when this lockout's ever going to end.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's really frustrating, especially because they kind of dangled the carrot in front of our faces the day before with this idea of, oh man, we're getting close. There was really that air of kind of, everybody was ready to kind of breathe that collective sigh of relief at 5 o'clock and say, all right, we've got ourselves a deal. Let's go play some baseball. And it really disappointing for it to not, play out that way.
Yeah, anticipation of that, I drove up to Jupiter and was there. On that ride, I even left kind of mid-afternoon. It's like an hour, 10 or 20 minutes to get up there for me, and kind of timed out to not spend all morning there or even half of the day. Get there by 3:30, and wrap this thing up. At 8, at 5, and if it had to go a little bit later, like it did Monday night, stick around. But anticipation of with a lot of optimism. And it didn't take very long to get there to find there was a lot of pessimism. And instead of a 5 o'clock joint, jubilant press conference with both sides saying the lockout's over and now it's full speed into the spring training and launching the season, we had at 5 o'clock the commissioner shortly after announcing games have been canceled. The union reps with a lot of former and current players players there in solidarity, expressing their disappointment. And now everyone left Jupiter. They're heading to New York. Probably talks resume next week. But what we know for sure, the commissioner announced the first two series or the first week of the season has been canceled. And he says the word canceled, and they will not, these games he's saying will not be made up. And the intent is for players not to be paid for that. Now, as we dig into this, Eric, I was kind of thinking, where was I going to go with this? Because the frustration level is very high, and the temperature in the room is way too high. And I'm like, am I going to be angry in this podcast? Am I going to be super frustrated? Or am I just kind of deep breath and kind of like, how we want to wade through this? So I want to kind of wade through it more in a calm way, because you have to go no further than Twitter than to see the anger. Or turn on any TV or podcast, and players clearly are frustrated. You could understand why. Owners are frustrated. You could understand why. Plenty of blame to go around everywhere. I'm not going to get too much into that. Everyone's kind of dug in their positions. But what do we know? And two things I wrote down, Eric, that are kind of sticking points, two among many. Competitive balance tax, or the CBT, or luxury tax, and the pre-arbitration pool, meaning that pool of money. That's a first-time thing happening in these CBAs, that for players who are not yet arbitration eligible. These are two big sticking points. I guess in 2021, that CBT was at 214 million. Players wanted about 238. The pre-arb pool, the owners are about 30 million in that pool. Players are at 85 million. As you can see, pretty big gaps and two big components. Just kind of your thoughts on those things, and because once those numbers move closer, this thing will get resolved. or move closer to be resolved, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, overall, as far as the CBT goes, the luxury tax or the competitive balance tax, rather, it's such a it's such an interesting sticking point because realistically, there aren't going to be many teams that are at that tax level. You're talking about maybe 3 or 4 teams at the maximum that are going to actually be at that level. So I don't, I don't quite understand the big, yeah. I don't know. As far as that goes, it's just, I think 230 is probably a reasonable number to settle on. Just because, like I said, the majority of teams, especially the small market teams, are going to approach maybe half of that. Um, for the foreseeable future. And then the pre-arbitration pool, um, that's a really big gap. I remember the players originally wanted to go
I think
110.
110. Yeah.
Yeah, they originally wanted 110 on that. So I think that's actually probably, you know, where they've made the most progress. Oddly enough, I know those numbers sound the most vastly different, but you really think about it, they've both sides have kind of given more in that area than they did in the CBT. As far as
Yeah.
pre, yeah,
Go ahead. Finish your
no,
thought.
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, yes, let's go back to the CBT for a minute. And you make a good point about what are the teams realistically that are going to go there. Yeah, I saw where Max Scherzer kind of noted
Yep,
the amount of teams that go tantalizingly close but don't cross it out of fear of penalty. The Phillies, I believe, were one. There are others. I don't know whether the Padres officially topped that number or not, but. You're right. The Marlins aren't getting anywhere near that anytime soon. The Tampa Bay Rays aren't getting there. The Pirates, they aren't getting there anytime soon. The fear, I guess, is you don't want to give the Yankees any more incentive from the owner side or the Mets with a Stephen Cohen to, if you push that thing up to 250, he goes to 270. It's
right,
like, he'll pay that, and then all of a sudden you're basically cleaning out the upper echelon of the free agent market. Um, I also think they're worried about, and no, not worried. Let me backtrack on that. When you're going up right now, if what the owners are saying is right, that you're basically for a good maybe 60% of the league will be making about 30% more, meaning pre-arb players, those rookies and those first, second year guys who haven't yet hit arbitration yet, they're going to see decent pay raises,
right,
550 or 60,000 to 700 ish, or maybe a little north of that for the minimum salary. That's going to mean for a team like the Marlins, Jazz's contracts going up. Marlins are loaded with these guys,
yeah,
so their number is going to go up. So when you say, oh, now the Marlins have, let's say, $100 million payroll, well, more of that is going to players that they already have that are young. They're just hitting ARP years. So they're not necessarily getting more money for free agents.
right,
So it's a fascinating number, and I think that's the wiggle room. I also think that's where the owners are really wanting that 14-team playoff, but even the commissioner said they're kind of, agreeable to 12
yeah,
for the playoffs. I still wouldn't be shocked if they could figure out something for 14, but I think it's going to be tied to this CBT. The players may eventually balk on that or agree to that, I should say, while they're balking now, if they could get it closer. That's just kind of my thought. Maybe that gets something that to get that number up on the players end, that they could probably maybe try to get that extra playoff round in there, for that aspect. So it's that's interesting. And you noted the pre-arb number. What the owners were, I think, we're at 10 million originally, so
yeah,
they're already up 20. I could see that settling about 40 or 50.
yeah,
That's going to affect the Trevor Rogers of the world, running runner-up for the NL Rookie of the Year last year. Instead of making if 550 or 60 was minimum last year, instead of making 650, he's now going to be over $1 million, and good for Trev. And that's going to mean he's going to get, once he hits arbitration, his number is going to be going up pretty significantly. I think those numbers are going to, I think they're going to settle there. To be honest with you, Eric, I think this deal, now the hard deadline came in. Obviously, let's give a little context, came in to save opening day, with the assumption you needed 4 weeks of spring training. To save opening day, the commissioner a while back said February 28th. They ended up taking it to March 1, because the owners, while you said earlier we thought we were that close, the fact that they extended the deadline and did another day, obviously for one side, felt that they were moving closer to an agreement. Otherwise, they would have shut it all down on the 28th, right?
Right.
But everyone would have said, that's my last offer, and everyone would have been angry, and they give their heated press conferences and move on. And I think these numbers are negotiable. I just think they started too late.
Right.
Even though that deadline was there, and even though they had 9 days in Jupiter to do this, if this would have started earlier, and I know that's a lot of fan frustration and a lot of frustration in this 3-month now lockout process, is it didn't start earlier in earnest. So that's the disappointment. That's why at least a week, and there's obviously going to be more, but of the season is going to be lost. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's the really frustrating part is, and maybe there is something to how close they were getting towards that deadline on March 1, because it feels like maybe if they would have even had another week, 2 or 3 more sessions, to really get after it, and they would have come up with something and gotten this done. But it just, I think, I don't know if it's one side or the other or both. I feel like both sides might have come into these talks a little overconfident that they were going to get what they wanted, and that it wasn't going to take, I don't think anybody foresaw the negotiations being quite this arduous.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of been the wrench that we've hit.
Yeah, because obviously there's a lot compared to past negotiations. There's a lot more player involvement. Max Scherzer has been very vocal in this process. He's a Scott Boras client. He has been very vocal, and all the it seems before you might have had a smaller group that represented you on your behalf. They did the negotiating, and then they went back and told their constituents. They laid it out, and they did it. This has been very public. You could even see where immediately, I can't remember if it was yesterday or the day before, when it came out from the player side that the owners were ready or wouldn't be too upset to miss the first month of the season. And you just started the day, which is really, it was already out there. The rhetoric was really bad. The environment was really bad. And so you had to wade through that. When you're giving negotiations get heated. Just the arbitration process. Let me just give you this example.
Right.
When a player reaches arbitration, when it goes to a hearing, there's a 3-person panel of arbitrators, and the player side with their agent, and the owner side sit there, and basically the owner side is saying why a player isn't worth the money he's asking for. And those talks can be, they're taken personally, even though they always say don't take it personally, but they're saying why you're not worth what you say you're worth.
Right.
And consequently, none of us want to be told how bad we are, or how undervalued we are. So it creates, and that's why, some players want to be in the room, some players don't want to be in the room. Some people, can forgive and forget. Some people can forgive, but they never forget, once it's resolved. There's so, with so much players sitting there hearing the talks, and it just has really kind of helped. It made it so public. So many steps of these negotiations in your past never were mentioned. Every little step of this has been publicized, instead of this is in quiet and with a common goal. Let's get this thing done. We'll yell in the room and we'll project a level of we're all together when we get it done. and this raises my biggest concern, Eric, about once this thing settles, is, and that's why I use the word temperature is too hot. And I don't want to be another one of those hot, everyone, for, players are all, everyone's mad. And, and we all know it. How are they going to now get to the finish line without nuking too much of the season? And how are they going to seem like happy campers once the season starts? Because the the rhetoric has been really ugly. And you're asking your fans who basically have picked sides. They're not. I'm on the side of baseball. I want
Right.
baseball to be played, and I want it to not be broken. And I really think that this is the time for level heads to really kind of say, okay, it's like, when do you take the boxer and say, hey, just calm down, calm down. This is just the intros. We're not ready to punch him right here during the weigh-in. We got to wait till we get into the ring or the octagon before we start punching. I really think it's a time that's needed for cooler heads to sit around and identify, where do we want to be? What are these numbers? Where can we wiggle, instead of just this coming back and finding out, what do you mean? We're not giving that up. And just have a much clearer vision of what it's going to take to finish this up and get this deal done.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you get these guys to kind of, even after a deal is done, to sit at the table and, be jovial and happy and pretend that everything's all right between the groups. And it's as you said, personally, if and I don't know if this is going to come off as a hot take. I think one of the things that you mentioned that's a sticking point here is the whole concept of arbitration, like you said, is contentious, and it breeds this, whether they want it to or not, it breeds this kind of adversarial relationship between the players and the owners that, quite frankly, doesn't need to exist um in an early part of a player's career. Like I would love to see us get a better system in place than something like that, because that just feels like it's part of what breeds this contentious rhetoric every few years or so when we get these CBA talks. Secondly, I do think you're right. Cooler heads do need to prevail, um, but at the same time, because of how public everything is, I think that you on both sides. You have guys on the player side, for example, that they don't want to look weak in these very public negotiations. You have the owners that don't want to look weak in this, especially with how public these negotiations are, because now we're going to know who gave up what, and kind of that's a big deal to these guys, and that's where it kind of worries me a little bit.
Yeah, and you're exactly right, and you're right. It's not going to just be lovey-dovey right now. And I heard in two different media outlets in the last 24 hours a word coming home last night from Jupiter. I had MLB Network radio on, and one of the analysts noted, what we're about now to feel or see is now that it's becoming a pain. Who's going to feel? There's going to be a pain tolerance point. And David Sampson, I believe, in his podcast I listened to, used the word pain, meaning now the pain is coming in the fact that paychecks aren't going to be made and gates aren't going to be, now is like the rhetoric has gone to a level of, the players and both sides are, we know how they feel about each other. But once you take a paycheck away from somebody, or once you take away a home game or a home series, now the pain is in the pocketbook. It's
Yep.
hitting their wallet. So we've reached that point where now it's going to be a pain tolerance. And to our next little topic within this topic, so the fans know, the players say they're prepared. The owner side, it's like normally April isn't a big attendance month anyway, weather early in the year. People haven't kind of settled in. And so aside from opening day, it's not always the greatest gate month. Uh, and so if they are willing to miss games over 6 months, April's about the best month to miss. Players, on the other hand, they now are looking at, from what I understand, what I saw reports, the union, the Players Association has kind of been withholding from their licensing agreements some money. And so I think that players, the more needy players, are getting like 5,000 for the month of February and 5,000 for the month of March, and then 15,000 in April. Well, do the math. If minimum salary is 700,000, you're
Right.
losing over 100,000 a month for 15,000. And players are losing over $20 million a day collectively in revenue. So we are in now. These are the numbers of pain. And before an agreement now, unless they get this agreement done pretty soon, within a week, there's going to feel that pain.
Right.
So how do we remove the pain and make it again look? And the pain also goes through the organizations in terms of the people in spring training. The sad thing is, I'm turning around while the commissioner's talking, and then the union side's talking. They're stadium workers at Roger Dean, people I've known many years, are standing behind you, and they don't know what the gates aren't opening for spring training for them. Yes, minor league season's going to start, but it's not the same. And their jobs are also affected, as many in the communities and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite frankly, and you know, for the let's be very clear here. As far as quote unquote pain tolerance goes, um, that's where the owners have the most leverage, quite frankly. Because for a lot of these guys, let's be honest, owning a baseball team is not their primary source of income. So
Correct.
for a lot of these guys, sure they don't want to miss tickets, but they're not going to go broke over any of this. Um, there are players that will be looking at substantially more of a financial hit. So I think from that perspective, the longer this goes on, um, and the closer you get to the season, and if we even go into the season before getting an agreement, the more likely I think we are to see this. The more likely we are to see something closer to that, uh, best and final offer by the owners, and I think that's where the owners are kind of sure. They're willing to miss the month of April because of the fact that maybe attendances are down and it's not what it would be come September. But I
Mhm.
think they're also factoring in that quote unquote pain that the players are going to feel. And so they're saying, hey, listen, once you get a taste of not getting your paychecks, maybe you'll want to come back to our offer.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the nature of bargaining.
Yeah.
Um, the thing about this end is how much you want to hurt your product,
Right.
and that's the real touchy part, and that's the sad part, because you could sit around, you could win a negotiation, but at what cost? At what's the price? And this is why I think these are I think the role of Tony Clark and Bruce Meyer, the chief union negotiator, and Tony Clark, the union chief, they're the boss. I think on their end, they got to kind of get that room in order, kind of get those guys and say, okay, we got to minimize your damage, however we do it, but we got to make sure that we're protecting you, where it isn't just everybody just and getting that deal done. Like I think the responsibility on them now is negotiators are basically hired to get deals done,
Right.
not to see who could hold out the longest. And on the flip side, from MLB, the commissioner and Hallam, that getting a deal done as quickly as possible to Yes, we use the word pain to mitigate to minimize, I should say, as much pain as possible. That's now we're in the pain process now. But how are you going to? How long do you want to be in that window? You have to. It's that leadership. The leadership on both sides has to really earn their keep right now, in my opinion. So we don't hear the Miguel Rojas's on Twitter having to feel his pain or any other player that they're getting it done.
Right.
And that's your job is to get deals done, not to sit around and then point fingers. Now, on the side of public and public perception, this hit me a few weeks ago. Whenever James Harden got traded to the Philadelphia 76ers, there was something that was going on in baseball labor talks. And I remember people tweeted it out. And it literally the same day, the 76ers acquired James Harden. And I saw the comments on Twitter that just basically said, "We don't care about baseball. We just got from Philly people in Philly. They're like, we don't care. We just got James Harden." And that's where you don't want to be in baseball. You don't want to be the afterthought. You don't want to have already after we're sitting around trying to raise the hand as if it's a title fight in an MMA match or something, saying, "And the winner is the players, or the winner is the owner." And meanwhile, both have faces so bloody that they're both going to the hospital, and no one really won other than they got the decision. But in here, what are they winning and what are they coming back to? How bloody does the winner want to look? And how bloody does the winner want to make the loser look? Because now those fans in Philly are watching Harden and the 76ers. And Mike mentioned this a little while ago in another podcast about the once you start pushing it into NBA playoffs or NHL playoff time, you're starting your baseball season at a time where the casual fan or the multi-sport fan is looking in your priority 2 or 3 in your market. And that's not a great place to be either.
No, not at all. I mean, to piggyback on your boxing analogy a little bit. Um, I mean, thinking about a fight like that, you know, these guys aren't just going 12 rounds; they're going like 24, 36 rounds at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and quite, somebody's gonna have their hand raised, and at the end of it, they're gonna look around and see, wait a second, there was nobody here to see me win this fight.
Yeah.
And that's the really sad, unfortunate thing that I think gets caught up here, because as you do hit the NBA playoffs, all of a sudden football, with the way that their schedule is constantly and ever expanding, you're hitting OTAs, and then that's
Yeah.
something that baseball doesn't want to compete with either. Bottom line is, as far as the product is concerned, this deal needs to get done and fast.
Yeah. And that's where we are. It's like I said, I was flabbergasted. I drove home last night without an agreement because I was like, "Oh my God, this is going to be a good day," and for these reasons, not, "Oh my God, I'm mad at this or this." I'm mad at what the sport, the damage that I foresee the sport incurring. As someone
Right.
who's been so invested in it, we're trying to build, especially in our market. We're trying to build the baseball brand. That's one of the reasons that I'm doing this post retirement, is to do my little part in shows like this. And ManOn2nd is to kind of provide another outlet of baseball. And when it's not being played, it's super, super frustrating. We could probably keep going on this, but let's segue over into our favorite local team, the Miami Marlins, which we thought Derek Jeter, Eric, was the face of the franchise, and he did an about face after it didn't even see year 5.
Yeah, that's really, really, really interesting stuff. Um, there are and we'll probably never know the entire full 100% God's honest truth about the entire situation. There's been reports going around a few different ways. I saw on Twitter you were corroborating some of the reports about the Marlins not being done, and that there is more uh, perhaps in the tank that they want to do. I just it's very I mean it's very odd to me. Um, whether it was that Jeter did or did not want to spend, or maybe he didn't know what his role was going to be after the fifth year. I don't know. Part of me thinks Jeter, maybe he just didn't have it in him to be an executive. Because Derek Jeter is this figure that he's so beloved in New York. Maybe he thought the job was shaking hands and kissing babies in Miami.
Yeah, that's interesting. I said this on either Alex Dono's podcast the other day. I don't know if he truly identified as an owner or with the owners. Uh, just a little, some of my thoughts and some of the things I've heard. For one, the most curious thing is the timing. It's like, why now? Because let's say an agreement was reached earlier in the week, we'd be preparing to get a agreement ratified and go into spring training. We didn't know it was all going to come apart or not get settled uh, when this decision was made. Clearly, this had been in the works, and the season eventually is going to get started and such. And why wasn't this immediately after last year? Was there a little power struggle within? There's a lot of speculation. I will say this from people I've connected with: there doesn't seem to be much love lost, or it's like, oh, he's gone. This is too bad. And yes, I did report that they intend to spend. So that was countering the reports that Derek was leaving because he didn't think there was going to be 15 or so million more to shell out on free agents or whatnot, trade pieces or whatnot to bring in to improve the 2022 Miami Marlins. That seemed fishy to me and kind of confirmed. I know Craig Mish had it out there as well. He's heard the same, that they are intending to spend. That doesn't mean they're going to spend a 214 in the
Right.
$214 payroll, but it's not like we're cutting pay. But none of that made sense anyway because they signed Sandy to the extension. They signed Garcia. They were in on Starling Marte. Um, you know they they, according to John Heyman, are still had been talking about Castellanos, which is a big ticket signing. Are they still in on Castellanos? I could see, yes, I could see them being in there. Now, what David Sampson had noted, and he would know from being an insider, knowing at the transition of the Loria group to the Sherman group, is projections of revenue. And David was saying that the Marlins did not meet those projections, and the ownership group was like, "We're not getting the revenue coming in, and you have total control. So what's giving?" And I think that could be largely at the root of it. I wouldn't necessarily dispute that. So there, it's kind of, I know it's out there, and some Marlin fans want to see it, thinking, "Oh, same old Marlins, they're penny pitching." I don't think that's the case in this. They literally gave Derek everything he wanted. They allowed him to do everything he wanted. They didn't come in and say trade Stanton. He came in and said, "I'm trading Stanton," and Yelich and so forth. That we're going to tear it down and build it, and that build it from the farm system up. I just find the irony of it is the man who preached patience ran out of patience in year 5 of his. I guess
Right.
it will be the final year of his contract, but I can't believe it's like, oh my God, what am I going to have in year 6? I just have to think that something we don't know. The curiosity again is the timing. Why that day? What prompted this? Resigns effective immediately, and they're ready to move forward with now Kim Ang. It becomes the decision. So that's the thing. They've been the face of Jeter for 4 years and change, and whoever month since. This has been Derek Jeter's vision and Derek Jeter's game plan. So
Yep.
where does it change? Does Kim Ang want, Castellanos? Did Jeter want, it's like Jeter had his hands on everything. Every signing they got, he signed off on. So again, that's very curious to why he left when he did, which means there was some, internal, going back and forth with ownership or their upper ownership, and they bought him out and he's gone.
Yeah, it's very and you wonder, this kind of ties into a few other things. And I don't want to make assumptions about the ownership group. I'm not going to do that. But you know, how does Major League Baseball, to be fair, has bigger issues right now. Um, but one of the main reasons why you know the Miami Marlins went to this group was because they had Derek Jeter attached to it, and they wanted Derek Jeter in their club. And
Right.
now Jeter's gone. Um, and that's not to say that this ownership is going to be penny pinching, but we do know that they did have more lucrative groups out there available to them at the time. That said, um, I do think it's interesting that we're going to probably see a lot more of Kim Ing's signature on this team. And then, like you said, Derek Jeter was the guy that did preach, we want to build this quote unquote the right way from the bottom up. And to their credit, they have done a lot. They've allocated a lot of resources towards their player development, towards international complexes, things of the like. So everything that they've done so far this offseason has pointed to them wanting to win. So I'm going to give them that. I'm going to give them that good faith there. But like you said, and we'll never know, the timing is really the most curious thing.
Yeah, I go back to this. They've had their, and we had um, Bryson Brigman on recently, the minor league prospect, and we had Zach McCambley, who's in, they both have been in Jupiter going through workouts before minor league camp opens, which is literally like any day now if it didn't open today or tomorrow or whatever. But remember in years past, it was the captain's camp. Remember, I wrote about it for MLB.com, others as well. The captain's camp. It was, Gary Dembo ran it. They invited about 40 or so prospects in, 30 or 40 of them. They came in and they were kind of doing the Derek Jeter blueprint, how to be a pro, how to handle yourself as a professional, how to deal with your teammates, how to deal with travel, and how to, the education, the English speaking players were learning Spanish speakers or you're learning English, all this kind of a 3 week or so school up in Jupiter, kind of as a prelude to spring training. They had their, what do they call it, winter meetings or winter, not winter, winter development or Marlins development camp, what it was called this year.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I found it kind of curious now, and after the fact,
right?
Why wasn't there a captain's camp? Maybe this is bubbling. Maybe this is bubbling for a while that they didn't have. Maybe they thought that Derek wasn't going to make it to the start of the season, or maybe he what his wife, they have 2 or 3 kids now, and this hasn't been exactly a lot of winning, and maybe they're wondering are they as close as they hope to be? Is this going to be another long year? A lot of unanswered questions. It's a fascinating time, and he and it, the Marlins had Derek Jeter. That was the weirdest thing. Here's Derek Jeter's with the Marlins. He was going out, extending his hand and trying to get corporate sponsorships and rally the community, doing behind the scenes to build, mend fences and build bridges to get a community that didn't like the previous ownership group and get them to buy into what the Marlins are doing. And that's what Derek was tasked with doing, along with him being very hands-on in every personnel move on the playing field. So big hire to come, when they finally hire a new CEO, if that's even going to be the title, because in years past under Loria, David Sampson was team president.
Yeah.
You had, Michael Hill as the president of baseball operations, before him, Larry Beinfest doing that. And you had other people that were handling the business side. Derek was CEO. That was the first CEO I believe they ever had. So they could go 2 ways, or they're going to hire someone, but is the title going to be officially a CEO? Is it? It could be that. It could be a few other things. They send out press releases. Bruce Sherman noted that they have a deep bench. The other thing too is there going to be an exodus, or other people who are tightly aligned to Jeter that are going to be moving on? There's a lot of former Yankees here that all came here. Is this going to have more of a former, LA Dodger thing with Kim and her ties to LA and people she's known through the years? She also worked in the commissioner's office, so there could be people that she pulls in from there. But it could be an interesting transition. Is it going to be a new personality, a new look? Like I said, everyone has a different evaluation. You and I could probably, everyone does. If we sit around and go in the off season, these are my top 5 free agent targets. If I had to number them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I may have Castellanos number 1. You might have Michael Conforto number 1. And so then if we're going after number 1, it's a difference of opinion. Who did Derek have number 1 on his list? Is that going to be the same person that Kim Eng and her, her vision and her support is going to be behind?
Yeah, and to your point, I guess I would be slightly concerned by mass exodus, if I'm honest. Um, and again, just piggybacking off of some of the things that you said, going back, I don't think. I think if it is a quote unquote CEO, then I think it would be somebody. Then I think that would be kind of the signal that, hey, we're happy with what we have on the baseball side in the front office. We want somebody that's a little bit more business minded. If it is team president, then you're looking at somebody that's going to be very hands on in the day to day, personnel operations. Uh, as far as it's just really unfortunate because given the lockout, so much of how we perceive uh, this move is going to come from what happens after the lockout and the moves that immediately follow it.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be the real tell about what happens. If they go out and they make big splashy deals, then you're going to have a lot of people connecting the dots. If they go out and they don't get done what they want to get done, people are going to be connecting the dots on there, fair or not. It's just something that's going to happen. And right now we're just kind of in this stasis where everything's kind of just hanging in the air right now. We don't really know until things start moving again.
No, yeah, absolutely. It's going to be wild. I mean, this is, I had some people ask me the other day, "Oh, Joe, who's going to be the closer or whatever?" I'm like, I'm not even remotely there because we want the doors unlocked, and that's no disrespect to the question or the fan, but it's just hard for me with all that's going on and having our eyes on, let's talk briefly about like Tampa Bay. I just think
Right.
a lot of what's being discussed really impacts Tampa Bay in terms of shifting, in terms of now you're raising the minimum wage and paying pre-arb guys. A lot of these things seem to be in place that are kind of, chipping away at what's making the Rays really special. And, to retain what they're trying to retain is going to be costing them at least 30 to 40% more on these younger players. So, I have my eye on a lot of things like that. I'm not paying as much attention to the X's and O's when we don't even know when the doors are going to open, what it's going to look like. But just briefly, what we do know is once this is signed and ratified, we don't know if it's going to be a 4-week spring training anymore because the players are planning on scrimmaging in Florida and
Right.
Arizona and kind of doing their own thing, which is a potential nightmare if big guys get hurt or it's like they're on their own now. So is it going to be a 4-week spring training? But we do know it's going to be a mass scramble, and there's not going to be a grace period, meaning there's not going to be a week to sign your unsigned arbitration guys.
Right.
There's basically be arbitration or hearings immediately.
Right.
Castellanos, Correa, Conforto on any unsigned, 200 players or so are still out there. They're going to have to get signed. Are you going to work a trade? Well, you're not going to have the 6 week of spring to see if, is Garrett Cooper my DH? You know what? Yeah, maybe he's doing well. Maybe he's not doing well. Maybe there's a better option out there. Maybe there's a trade to be had. You're kind of might have to run with what you have. So you're not going to have necessarily enough time to scout, evaluate what's out there in other camps if everything is super, super condensed. So it's going to be a complete madhouse once this thing happens. And let's say you do sign Castellanos, is he going to be ready to play the first week of the season? He might not be ready to play till May.
Right.
Meaning getting himself ready because if he hasn't played and the season started, now spring training's over. There's only so much pickup games you can play. Uh, you know what I mean? So it's baseball is completely in uncharted, crazy waters right now. In its own bizarre way, it might be helping in terms of interest because of the bizarreness, but it's not really the sustainable, model to kind of build your sport the way you would like to.
Right. Yeah, and just going back to the Rays, a thought that I just had as you were pointing, out the pay raises for some of those guys that are making the smaller contracts, the younger guys really, is in hindsight now, that Wander Franco deal is absolutely massive.
Yep.
Because 5 6 years down the road, you know, if the players get some of what they want, that's gonna look like a really good deal for the Rays.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that was kind of the consensus at the time, but I think now even more so. Um, and then, like you said, going into uh March, or going into the spring this year, hitters always are behind early on in the season. Um, I God, it would not shock me to see a guy like Jacob DeGrom, hit June with like a sub 1 ERA.
Yeah, if he's healthy. Yeah.
Yeah, if he's healthy and ready to go, it's gonna be like the on-field product is gonna be affected pretty significantly.
Yeah. Remember, was it last year when all the no hitters and everyone was like
Yeah,
freaking out?
yeah, I think.
Everyone's throwing no
Oh my
hitters.
god.
Well, I mean, you see why, and now you're going through. I mean, just think how crazy it's been since 2020.
Yep.
60 games, so hitters didn't get a ton of at bats. 21 was okay, the full season, but a lot of people were still kind of lagging because they didn't get the reps in 20. And some had great years, some players took the back, they took a step back. Now again, it's messing up player development
Right.
crazily, for guys like Peyton Burdick, who needs to get all this, because he
Hmm.
Days like 24 now. These guys are now all of a sudden going to be 24, 25 years old in double and triple A and missing significant time. How is this going to help Jazz, who needs the at bats? If he struggles now, and then the other thing they're doing when you're limiting the amount of options. Remember, they're going to like five
Right.
options a year, meaning the player can come up and down, but no more than 5 times. That's going to that's going to get one guy's service clock going. But if you need to kind of replace a guy that's struggling, you may have to now, rely on another one of your prospects, get him up and down. So you're burning the clock on somebody that, may have still needed more time, or maybe you got, your second and third prospects are both good shortstops, let's say, and your shortstop goes down. So you need that, your number one shortstop prospect to go in. But if he gets hurt, now you now you got the
Right.
other guy, or some sort of service time management there of getting guys up and down. You're restricted of how many times you can bring them up and down. So you're starting the clock on another prospect. Now what happens there? They run out of options, and boom, you're like with Magneuris Sierra situation, and you're getting rid of him. When you didn't fully develop him. Not that there's many tears probably for Mags being gone, but in my complaint with Mags was more of how he was rushed to the big leagues way too early and exploited, and then his career has not been allowed to take off, and because his development was kind of hastened. That how many prospects are going to mess with this? There's a lot of stuff that might look good or seem fascinating on paper in the CBA, but how it's going to be executed is what kind of is going to be fascinating to me, and what's going to kind of be dictating whether the CBA is a good one or not once it's eventually finalized and ratified.
Right. I mean, I don't. I think just from what you're saying there, it definitely makes journeyman a lot more valuable. guys that you can kind of have that are, you know, career AAA guys that can spot in and play at a decent level. In the meantime, when guys do go down, it does give those guys a little bit more of
But
a
they not option; they have to be designated.
right, right, true,
But also on top of that is, I think those players might be squeezed out if the younger players are making more money. That you're not going to sign like Neil Walker a couple of years ago, and people might say he wasn't worth signing anyway. But Neil's a consummate pro. Instead of signing him for 2 million, he might be your non-roster guy who normally in years past would have got 2 million, when no one thought anything of it, and he'd be just an up and down guy. Meaning, they come him up for a month or 2 weeks, cut him, no one picks him up, he goes back to AAA. And how much does Neil Walker want to be in AAA when you're been in the big leagues and fairly productive
exactly,
for a while? And so I think that player is going to, Josh Harrison's of the world, they're going to have a hard time. Good players, good veteran players are going to either be pushed out of the league, because I think that if you got to pay someone $1 million, you got to pay your kid. You're just going to move him up pretty fast. So there's a lot of stuff I think is going to be, as much as there's this push to reward them financially, the younger players, that not everyone's going to pan out, and again, I think it's going to be real interesting. But I do think that kind of aging veteran that would have been your Wes Helms, or that good bench guy, a good off the bench guy, good pinch hitter, good clubhouse
right.
guy, is might not exist anymore.
It's definitely something to think about. Um, as we do approach all this, the how everything plays out once the deal does get ratified. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. We are running up against our time limit here. We're getting up
Yeah,
to 52
yeah,
minutes
we don't
now.
usually do it this long. I didn't think we'd go this long, but I think the subject matter was worth it.
Absolutely.
So that's why I didn't mind going about 10, 15 minutes
No,
over.
absolutely not.
But yeah, Eric's right. You got to reel it in. Sometimes I ramble on. So appreciate you guys for hanging there with me. And I always appreciate you, Eric. And take us out, my friend.
Yes, sir. So you can find us on Twitter at ManOn2nd. That's going to be at ManOn2nd. We do post the streams of our podcast there, and then you can also find all of our stuff at the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. That's 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Thank you guys, and we'll see you again next week, hopefully with better news.